Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us for the NRFit Improving Patient Safety webinar. We're honored to have with us the first U.S. clinicians to successfully adopt NRFit connectors, and we look forward to sharing their insights and experiences with you today. Before we begin, I'd like to take a moment to explain how you can engage with us during the session. If you have any questions, please submit them using the Q&A feature here on Zoom. Our team will do our best to provide written responses during the presentation and address as many questions as possible during the dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Now, it is my pleasure to introduce our first speaker, Ben Davis. Ben is the Executive Director of the Global Engineered Device Supplier Association, commonly known as GEDSA, for the last 3 years, but has been involved with the organization since 2012, serving on various committees and on the board of directors. Previously a VP of Engineering and Product Development in the medical device industry, he's an inventor on over 75 patents and holds a BS in Industrial Engineering from the Georgia Institute of Technology. Our next speaker is Shannon Bertignoli, PharmD. Shannon joined the Institute for Safe Medication Practices as Medication Safety Specialist Publications in 2022. Her work includes content development for the Acute Care newsletter, as well as an editor for various other organizational publications. Prior to joining ISMP, Shannon worked at the Children's Hospital of Orange County in California as a pediatric clinical pharmacist for 12 years, most recently as a medication safety and quality specialist, where she helped with the organizational conversion to NRFit devices. Shannon is a clinical member of the GEDSA Board of Directors. Our next speaker is Stacy Ethington, MSN RN. Stacy is a medication safety nurse specialist at Nebraska Madison. She completed both undergraduate and graduate degrees from Clarkson College in Omaha, Nebraska. While she's been a nurse for 15 years, the last 8 have been dedicated to medication safety. She has led initiatives such as conversion to NRFit and implementation of IV pump interoperability. She recently co-authored a 10-year narrative review of intraoral misconnections and is currently working on the next article focused on neuraxial misconnections. Stacy is a clinical member of GEDSA's Board of Directors, and she is also a member of GEDSA's NRFit Clinical Advisory Board. And now I'll go ahead and turn it over to our first speaker, Ben Davis.
Thank you, Madison, for those introductions. We'll start by a look at our agenda today. Our main goal is to raise awareness of the NRFit, which is the ISO 80369-6 patient safety initiative and how it impacts neuraxial devices. I'll start really in the beginning here with just kind of a brief description of GEDSA and its mission, and then we're going to cover the content through 4 modules today. We'll start with what a misconnection is. We'll define it. Then we'll then talk about the impact of misconnections. We'll then talk about how to reduce misconnections within our fit. Within that, we'll have a device overview. And then we'll get into module 4, which is our conversion planning and resources that are available to you. And in there, we'll have our advice and lessons learned from Gillette Children's NRFit conversion. And then we'll wrap up with a Q&A session, as Madison mentioned a minute ago. So GEDSA stands for the Global Engineered Device Supplier Association. We are a nonprofit trade association whose mission is to advance patient safety worldwide through safer ISO-compliant connectors. We're made up of about 40 manufacturers and 30 supporting organizations. And we primarily have 2 patient safety initiatives, NRFit and then NFit. Hopefully you've all heard of NFit. Hopefully your facility has adopted NFit. Our supporting organizations that we are also engaged with we have regulatory bodies like the FDA that we work with, ISO, we have patient advocacy groups, and then professional societies that we also work with. And then the organization is guided by our board of directors. And with that, I will pass it to Stacy to get us going on our first module.
Thanks so much, Ben. So to kick us off, we need to really define what is a misconnection, and we can look to the FDA for guidance on that. The FDA defines a misconnection as inappropriate connections occurring between 2 connectors that attach devices with different intended uses or applications, such as enteral feeding systems and non-enteral systems. So if we look at this image on the slide, we can see on this very tiny patient, just within the scope of one picture, 4 potential sites that could be misconnected to each other. And we know from case reports that in the most severe instances, this can lead to patient death. Next slide. I think everyone on the call can recognize how complex delivery of care can be in the healthcare setting. Healthcare providers come to work every day intending to provide great patient care to their patients, but at the end of the day, we're all human and mistakes can happen. So our focus for today is really looking at those misconnections. The image on this slide is also provided by the FDA, and there is a hyperlink available as well. And the FDA has a really nice website that shows different potential misconnections that can occur. They've basically simulated it on mannequins, and these all come from actual patient reports. So on this slide, you can see that this patient has peripheral IV access, and there has been a misconnection from the epidural tubing to that IV site. And a powerful statement was made in our practice run through yesterday. Someone on the call said, it's a silent error. Like you don't even realize that it's happened. And that's what can make these things so dangerous. Next slide. So some other examples that we have from the FDA, and we've already talked about that risk between epidural and peripheral IV. We have seen misconnections occur between IV tubing and nasal cannula. We've seen this occur between feeding tubing and air inline ventilator suction catheters. We've seen this occur with heparin locks connected to automatic blood pressure cuffs. And we have a case report where a feeding tube was coupled with a peripheral line on a pregnant woman, which resulted in enteral nutrition being delivered directly into her bloodstream. Neither the 35-week-old fetus nor the woman survived that error. So these risks are very real. Next slide. So how common are neuraxial misconnections specifically? We have a number of examples to provide you with today, but for this slide, really want to focus on this 20-year review that was written by Viscusi et al. This paper reviewed the 1999 to 2019 timeframe, and within the paper, it goes through 133 cases where there was a neuraxial misconnection. Of those 133 cases, 26 resulted in patient death. There were cases where epidural meds were given mistakenly IV. That was 29.2% of reported events. There were cases where IV medications were given via the epidural, which was 27.7% of the reported events. So we know this is real, not only for the enteral route, we have a solution for that. We know this happens in neuraxial as well, which is what our discussion is focused on today. So with that, I'm going to hand it off to Shannon.
Thanks, Stacy. So recently, clinical advisors working in coordination with GEDSA conducted an anonymous survey to understand clinicians' experiences with tubing misconnections. And the responses from 261 clinicians were shared in our ISMP newsletter. Almost half of the respondents reported having a tubing misconnection reach the patient or a close call within their organization. And of those, 17% reported more than one misconnection. Nearly 80% of the events were not reported externally, or the clinician did not know if they were reported outside of their organization. The most common misconnections included mix-ups between the IV and enteral route, followed by IV and neuraxial, which represented more than 1 in 5 cases. So now that we know these events are occurring, let's talk about how this can happen. Similar to any preventable adverse event, there's several contributing factors that are involved and shown here. They can be attributed to multiple devices and multiple lines, low lighting, time pressure, and even nursing turnover. So if the nurse is used to the system in one organization and they go to a new organization that uses a different system, there's lots of opportunities for error. But the root cause in the middle is the fact that there are compatible connectors for these different body systems, particularly LOR connections, which Ben will now discuss in more detail.
Thanks, Shannon. So yeah, what is our root cause here? And it really is mostly attributed to the success of the Lure connector. The Lure connector is a great connector. It has been around for over 125 years and has been used in pretty much every imaginable medical application that's out there. When we talk about new solutions to prevent misconnections, we're really talking about a paradigm shift, because again, we've had Lure patent here shown in 1897. So this has been well established and well used, but overused, unfortunately. And it's that universal nature and overuse that has made body applications that should not be connected able to be connected. And with that gets us through our first module. So key takeaways here are that tubing misconnections can lead to severe consequences, including patient injury and death. Tubing connections are relatively common with cases in the literature that have been reported, but the true occurrence rate is likely much higher as per those survey results that Shannon shared. And it's the universally used connectors, particularly the Lure connectors, that have contributed to the risk of tubing misconnections. And with that, we'll let Shannon get us started on module 2.
Great. So we've defined what a misconnection is. We've given examples of how they occur and data around how common they are, but all of that literature is a bit abstract. So now let's look at the real people who have been involved in these events and the devastating impact that these misconnections can have in our patients. And please be aware, this is an emotional video and it contains patient stories that might be triggering.
I didn't get to say goodbye. And she said, "Oh, honey, I'll see you tomorrow." I said, "I know, Mom, but I just want you to know I love you." She said, "I love you too."
It's so important that we take the time to make these changes.
Yes, this is a big deal. It's huge. It is huge to change all the tubings in all the hospitals. There's a reason for it. This can't happen.
My name is Trisha Astad. I've been a registered nurse for 32 years, mostly in the areas of critical care. Of course, always focusing on quality care in a very safe environment. On June 5th of 2012, my mom went into an outpatient surgery center to have carpal tunnel surgery done. My mother had the procedure done under a local, no general anesthetic, came into the recovery room. The nurse took the line from the blood pressure monitor, and instead of inserting it into the cuff, she inserted it into a port of my mother's IV. This particular blood pressure machine, when you hit the button, would attempt 3 times to get a blood pressure reading before it would give up. So the large amount of air that would have entered into the cup to create a reading went into my mother's bloodstream 3 times. That explains why she was gone within a minute of arrival, because she just died from a very massive air embolus, and that explained her terrible presentation in the emergency room.
My name is Johanna Back, and our daughter was on the receiving end of a tubing misconnection in 2006. She was born at 30 weeks. She has Down syndrome and duodenal atresia, so she already had some issues, plus she needed to have an open heart surgery. She was in the NICU for a while. While in the NICU, a nurse attached her G-tube line to her IV line. When the nurse realized her mistake, she yanked out all of the tubing, and I'll never forget how she looked that day. They didn't think she was going to make it. They finally got some lines in, and they just did all they could do to support her. It took 3 days on life support, but she did make it through. We were very lucky that she did make it through, because most people don't make it when this happens to them.
My name's Glenda Rogers. I've been an OB nurse for 26 years. My daughter Robin was 35 weeks pregnant when she was admitted to the hospital with nausea, vomiting, dehydration, and pain. The doctors caring for her had decided that she needed to be transferred to a higher level of care, but before they would transfer her, they wanted to check on the baby. They did the ultrasounds and checked, and there was no heartbeat, and we had to tell Robin that the baby had died. Before the transfer was completed, Robin also died. On her IV pole, there was a bag of, the best way I can describe it is it looked like a melted chocolate milkshake. A big bag, like 2,000 liters. And on every corner of that bag, it had not for IV use. And it was hooked to her PICC line. The tubing was compatible with the PICC line, so there was no trouble hooking it up. She started it at 11 o'clock to run at 200 an hour. It wasn't discovered until 5 o'clock that night.
So obviously very difficult to hear some of those stories. And when we talk about who is impacted by this, these are just really a handful of the patients who have been harmed. And also remember the impact of the healthcare practitioners that are involved in each of these events. So some reports in the literature was a patient administered succinylcholine through epidural access, resulting in prolonged duration of neuromuscular blockage, intrathecal administration of contrast medium, resulting in spasms and respiratory distress, a 71-year-old patient who received potassium fluoride injection into the epidural space during surgery for ovarian carcinoma, and she experienced severe pain, paraplegia, and autonomic dysfunction. Next slide. So perhaps the most well-known cases are that of vincristine administered intrathecally instead of intravenously, resulting in progressive neurological complications and death. So in one case here, it was a 6-year-old girl, leukemia survivor. She received an intrathecal administration of vincristine instead of methotrexate, resulting in progressive quadriplegia, respiratory paralysis, and after more than 5 months fighting, the patient passed away. In our ISMP newsletter just last week, we shared about an error that was printed in a peer-reviewed publication where they referred to intrathecal instead of intravenous vincristine. And we've also heard people accidentally say intrathecal vincristine when they mean intravenous. So this is a concern that must be addressed, especially as more organizations move toward the use of NRFit devices. So we must educate practitioners that if intrathecal vincristine is inadvertently communicated, a less experienced practitioner might place vincristine in an NRFit syringe, which could lead to the inadvertent intrathecal administration of the drug. And if not already done, take steps to ensure that vincristine and other vinca alkaloids can only be ordered by the intravenous route and administered only after dilution in a mini bag, which is the ISMP targeted medication safety best practice number 1, which also calls for prominently labeling vincristine with the statement for intravenous use only, fatal if given by other routes.
So thanks for those explanations, Shannon. We've now given you plenty of examples of these misconnections. We've heard the impact stories from loved ones that were impacted by tubing misconnections. So clearly we have a problem here with these tubing misconnections. So how do we solve this problem though? Well, there's all kinds of ways to skin a cat and methods you could try to take to resolve an issue like this. And they have varying levels of effectiveness. We have things that are easy to do, like, labeling or color coding, or, writing something like a protocol to follow. But really, none of that really addresses sort of the root cause of what allows a misconnection to occur. To address that, you really have to get into a forcing function. Think of that also like more like a mechanical solution, so that you kind of remove the capability for the error to actually occur. And it is with that in mind that technical experts, clinical experts, regulatory and standards experts all got together years ago through the ISO process. That's the International Organization for Standardization. They all got together to develop the ISO 80369 series of connector standards for what's called small bore tubing connectors. In doing that, they designed connectors that are mechanically engineered to be incompatible with other areas of therapy. Of course, today we're talking about ISO 80369-6, which is more commonly known as NRFit. But this is just one part of the spectrum of tubing connectors. So I like to share this image to help explain that this is not just neuraxial connectors that we're talking about. We're talking about IV connectors. That's ISO 80369-7. Those are going to retain the Lure connectors. They're just now under this new ISO standard. They're have a little bit more criteria from the previous standard. You have limb cuff inflation is another application, urinary collection, enteral, that's ISO 80369-3, that's NFit. So hopefully you've heard of NFit. Hopefully your facility is using NFit. And then respiratory will be the -2. And of course, today we're talking about -6, which is neuraxial or NRFit. And these are not new. Most of these originally published in 2016. Some general requirements of all these are that they are not connectable with other connectors in the series. They all must be rigid or semi-rigid. If we have, the reason for that is if you have a soft or pliable or flexible connector, you can force fit things into it that are not meant to go into it. So it's important they be rigid or semi-rigid. These all have to pass misconnection risk assessments, risk analysis, usability, and human factors testing. And then another requirement is these not be connectable with Lure or needleless connector ports. So our key takeaways from Module 2 are that misconnections have a significant impact on patient safety, and they can occur due to various factors, but the root cause is that mechanical compatibility of the connectors. The other takeaway is that ISO design standards have been developed for system-specific applications. This ensures that connectors are not connectable with others in the series and not connectable with Lure or needleless ports. And that these ISO standards, it's really implementing an incompatibility by design connectors that help improve patient safety globally, because this is a global, series. Now we'll get into the specifics of, so we showed you the whole series. Now we'll get into the specifics of the -6, which is of course, the neuraxial or NRFit connector. In this module, we'll describe its components, and then we'll give a comparison. We'll kind of show you how these look, compared to other connectors that are out there. And I like to start this discussion with this image because I think it's important to note these standards weren't just haphazardly thrown together, or these were very well thought out. This set of images is straight from the ISO standard, and as you can see, these connectors are very dimensioned. So there's tons of dimensions that define these, and not only are there quite a few dimensions that you have to adhere to, these are all very tightly toleranced as well. So it's a very, very rigorous specification. And it's that specification and those dimensional criteria that allows it to mitigate these misconnection risk. And these have been assessed by the FDA and other regulatory agencies throughout the world, and it's passed their sort of rigorous scrutiny that that the regulators use to analyze these. These connectors have been available in Japan and Europe for several years. Japan has effectively been 100% converted since 2022. And since the launch of the safer NRFit connectors, we've not received or heard of a single report of a misconnection event that was attributed to the NRFit connector. And then this image just gives you a real high level sort of idea of what we're talking about here. The NRFit will connect with NRFit, but NRFit will not connect with Lure, and Lure will not connect with NRFit. So they are dimensionally just different enough to where they're incompatible. However, they're very similar, so they still perform. That their performance is basically the same. It's just they have just enough differences to where they will not be interconnectable. And with that, I will share this video that helps describe that not being connectable with Lure. And with that, I'll pass it to Stacy to give us an idea of the devices that are impacted by NRFit.
Thanks, Ben. So if you were like I was a few months ago, your head is probably swimming thinking about all of the applications that this change could potentially apply to. I think it's well understood that this will have a big impact for anesthesia, but if you think of other areas like oncology, neurology, this has a widespread impact. And so having a good understanding of what the equipment difference will look like or how things will be different is important. So on this first slide, we just have like a crosswalk, straight from Lure to NRFit. These are to scale. And so you're able to see just how different the connector head is. So the top image is a slip tip syringe, the middle image being a lock tip, and then the bottom being that loss of resistance syringe. And notice on the NRFit side, many of the syringes have that yellow color to act as a visual cue that this is neuraxial. Next slide. Few more pieces of equipment here. The top line being that bacterial flat filter. Then we have both our epidural and our spinal needles. Next slide. And then finally, showing the catheter connector, both Lure and NRFit, and filter straws.
Thanks, Stacy. And then I like to share this slide just kind of in all one shot to be able to show you dimensionally how these compare with other syringes that are out there. So just quickly, if hopefully, like I said earlier, you've heard of the NFit, but NFit syringes here are shown as A and B. You've probably heard of an oral slip tip syringe for like oral medication delivery, which is C. And then we have our D is our Lure slip, E is Lure lock, F is the NRFit lock. So if you just look for a moment at E and F, these are side by side. You can, if you have a really keen eye, you can probably tell the nozzle of F, the NRFit, is just slightly smaller in its outside diameter than the Lure lot. But I mean, they're very, very close dimensionally, but they're just different enough to where they are not, the systems are not connectable. And then G is our NRFit slip. So a big difference you can tell here between D, the Lure slip, and the NRFit slip G is that the NRFit slip does get a collar around it. It's just, this is a unthreaded collar in the slip configuration. And I also just want to take a brief second to mention that, you know, this is, hopefully you don't have the idea this is like just a GETSA sort of initiative, and that we're, you know, pushing toward it. It's we really want to see this come to fruition in the name of patient safety. This is the right thing to do, but it's not just us. There are many patient safety advocacy groups that are also in support of this, and I actually like to just share the ISMP position on this because I think it is a good summation of why it's important. And they say the implementation of the NRFit connector provides a way to reduce the risk of neuraxial misconnections, which can be devastating to patients, families, and healthcare practitioners. Simply put, patients expect healthcare practitioners to put their safety first, and transitioning to NRFit will clearly improve patient safety. So our key takeaways for Module 3 is that the ISO 80369-6 is the NRFit, which is the neuraxial specific connector. And the key NRFit components include bacterial flat filters, epidural needles, spinal needles, catheter connectors, slip and locking syringes, and loss of resistance syringes as well. So now we'll start Module 4, which is our conversion planning and resources. So, you know, what resources are available to you as you plan your NRFit conversion. This is usually done in a sort of 3-phase approach, is what way we've seen a lot of facilities do this, where they have the sort of start with a awareness phase, which, you know, you could describe what we're doing today as sort of an awareness phase. That's your communications, you know, kind of getting your feet wet just a little bit and trying to understand what this is. Then there's a preparation phase. That's where it's kind of more brought internally. Education is done, you know, throughout the facility to help enlighten everyone as to, you know, what this is and why it's important. And then we have the actual adoption phase, which of course is the actual transition where you're working to physically implement the system, you know, working with supply chain, making sure that the previous products, you know, for those applications are pulled into the new NRFit products are in place. Another great resource for these for planning your conversion is stayconnected.org. That's GETSA's website. On there we have transition checklists, we have frequently asked questions, brochures, we have videos, just a wealth of materials. Of course, not enough time to get into all those today, but that's a great resource for you to be able to visit to see those items. Another really helpful thing that is available is the NRFit Interactive Teaching Station. We actually call these toolkits. This is basically a trifold display, and it is good to set up. I've seen this used very effectively, where it very succinctly gives sort of the what, the why, the when, and the where of NRFit. It describes, you know, the products that are changing. Here on the, you can see the left side of that board. And then below this are 3 bins that are, of course, not pictured here, but they're full of NRFit products. So, you know, maybe it's the engineer in me, but I'd really like to have hands-on. You know, once I can put something in my hands and I can really kind of understand it and make sense of it all, and that's when it kind of becomes real and it's not, you know, abstract or just on paper to me anymore. So I think these have been very helpful in educating people about NRFit. So these are available. You can see the link here to actually get these, or you can just reach out to us and we'll be happy to get some to you. And just some additional resources that people tend to migrate to that I think they find very helpful are, we have a NRFit product supply and resource page. So on here we list out GETSA's members that do NRFit products. It has they'll identify what their key categories are so that you can quickly kind of see who provides what products. And then 2, if they have a crosswalk available, it's also linked there. So you can click on that and you can see, you know, hopefully it's a one-stop shop. You can click to all these crosswalks and see, you know, today I'm using this product from this vendor, and for NRFit, here's the crosswalk and it links, this SKU would actually go with this. This is the NRFit product for that, or this is the kit or whatever, so that it's easy to map from your existing products over to NRFit. On the website, we also have our frequently asked questions and then transition checklists. And these, we actually have, I think it's 3 different checklists for different departments, so things that they would want to consider on a department to department kind of basis. But another really important aspect to transition is getting all the stakeholders involved. I mean, because this impacts so many different departments. You have anesthesia, of course, pharmacy, nursing, surgery, supply chain, risk management, just you name it. They're just about need to be aware of this initiative and how it might impact them. But really, what's central to all of this is having a transition leader. We have really found on the NFit side of things with that enteral connector that the most successful transitions, the one that had the least amount of sort of hiccups, the ones that went the most smoothly, was where we had a strong transition leader, someone that really took this on, spearheaded the project, worked with all these other stakeholders, and then made the transition happen. So we think that's very important as well. And speaking of the actual conversion process and having stakeholders involved in making it happen, we'll now start our section of the webinar with our folks from Gillette Children's to discuss the sort of advice and lessons that they've learned through their NRFit conversion process. And I'll let Madison introduce our speakers.
Thanks so much, Ben. It's an absolute pleasure to introduce the remarkable individuals who played a pivotal role in the first U.S. NRFit conversion. To begin, I'd like to introduce Addie Walsh. Addie is a clinical procedure specialist at Bebron Medical, specializing in regional anesthesia and vascular access. She covers the upper Midwest, including Minnesota, Iowa, North Dakota, South Dakota, and part of Wisconsin. Our next speaker is Risa Eckhart, a dedicated pharmacist and medication safety coordinator with over 25 years of experience in optimizing medication management and enhancing patient safety in diverse healthcare settings. Risa has worked in acute care settings as a clinical neonatal and pediatric intensive care pharmacist, adult intensive care, nutrition support pharmacist, and clinical staff. She also has extensive background as a home infusion clinical pharmacist and home infusion pharmacy director. Risa is passionate about advancing medication safety initiatives, minimizing the risks associated with medication errors, and contributing to better health outcomes for all patients. Risa holds a Bachelor of Science and a Doctor of Pharmacy degree from the University of Minnesota Twin Cities and is working towards her certification in medication safety. Our next speaker is Joseph Kylander. Joseph has more than a decade of experience in healthcare supply chain management in the Twin Cities. Currently, he is the Value Analysis Program Manager for Gillette Children's. Within this role, he collaborates with stakeholders to drive value for the organization as it relates to products, equipment, projects, and improved patient care. Our next speaker is Katie Houle. Katie is the Manager of Peri-Anesthesia, Sedated Imaging, CRNA, and Surgery Scheduling teams at Gillette Children's. With a career primarily based at Gillette, she's held various roles, including positions in the PQ, education, and interim leadership across the organization. Recently, Katie completed a 2-year term as president of the American Board of Peri-Anesthesia Nursing Certification.
All right, thank you, Madison. We'll take it from here. So I wanted to just introduce you a little bit to Gillette Children so you understand our area of practice and the organization that we come from, and a little bit of background on our patients and why we felt it was important to move forward. So Gillette Children's is a beacon for brain, bone, and movement disorder and conditions. Next slide, Madison. So we come to you from St. Paul. So St. Paul is our main hospital campus and outpatient clinic. As noted on the map, we have various outstate locations as well to serve our patients with complex and often lifelong conditions. We do have partnerships and care that we provide to all 87 Minnesota counties. We've seen patients from 43 U.S. states and territories and over 8 countries globally. So it is a location that patients do come to for specialized patient care. Next slide. The top conditions that we do see and care for at Gillette by our patient volumes broken down is cerebral palsy. We do a lot of ortho procedure and limb length discrepancies, just developmental dysplasia of hips. We do have an extensive epilepsy program, and we do a significant amount of spine surgeries, both idiopathic and other conditions. Next slide. So I'm going to partner with my Gillette team here and walk you through our timeline, our process for how we did transition to NRFit and some lessons learned. So I will turn it over to Lisa from here.
Thanks, Katie. I'm Risa Eckert. I'm the Medication Safety Coordinator for Gillette Children's. What happened for us for the NRFit conversion is we started back in the fall of 2023 when we met to review the ISMP guidelines for safe medication use in perioperative and procedural settings. This is a set of guidelines that comes out every other year, and when it does, myself and my director of pharmacy, as well as Katie, sit down to look at opportunities within our OR perioperative settings for safety improvements or safety adjustments that we could put into place. So when we were going over these guidelines, there is a guideline in the medication delivery section that was talking about mitigating the potential for human error from misconnections in the neuraxial area. And so specifically it read in the quotations there in the middle of the slide, use an interdisciplinary team such as pharmacy, nursing, and anesthesia to transition to the new design standards for neuraxial NRFit connectors used on medical device tubing, reducing the risk of misconnections. So from this, we just started to do some research on our own, as well as reaching out to our partners within our own facility to find out more. We certainly got supply chain involved early on, but our first step was just contacting our anesthesia director. We contacted our director of pediatric anesthesia to see the interest of the anesthesiologist in moving forward, and we received great support from that group, and they were very interested in partnering in with us. From there, the additional partner, a strong partner for us, was also supply chain. And then it grew from there. Next slide. I'm going to hand it back to Katie and then also Joseph from supply chain.
Right. So as Risa shared, we did start with our anesthesia providers, and he was very interested in the concept and what we knew very little about. So we did reach out to Addie from Beyond to discuss the product and really to get some samples. And I think Ben alluded to this earlier, that sometimes the best understanding of the safety device is actually to look at it and put our hands on it. So we were able to get a sample of the NRFit devices and able to see how they did actually pose an in-the-moment stop to a misconnection. It was a hard stop, and it was something our anesthesia providers were very interested in. And from there, we did reach out to get some additional items so that we could see what was involved in the epidural kits and our compatible CAD tubing and from ICU Medical. And I will turn it over to Joseph from there.
Thanks, Katie. So I'm Joseph Kylander. I'm the Value Analysis Program Manager with Gillette Children's as a member of our supply chain team. So from this point, we identified the appropriate epidural kit and CAD set, but our medical director, Dr. Angel, had noted that we need items outside of these kits unless we want to waste and open kits every time we need it, such as syringes, filters, connectors. And to this end, we again, work with our industry partner, Addie Walsh with Braun, to identify the list of items that are NRFit compatible that meet that need. And with this information, we built a cross-reference list with the items that we are using that are our lure lock for our epidural procedures. And this helped facilitate two kind of important objectives within this project. First, it allowed us to provide Braun with an estimate of our usage on these items, which then they could provide the sufficient quantities for trial and potentially go live, which is quite important since there literally was no demand in the American market for these products. The product had to be shipped from overseas lengthy lead time. So having that, there's no quick replenishment if you don't have the product. So having that information to Braun was a very important step. And second, really helped us identify where within our anesthesia these products are located. So when we do have to trial and go live, we make sure that there's no incompatible product left within that storeroom. So if it's accidentally picked. And so, the next kind of important step was our walkthrough. So I'll pass that on to Addie to discuss the clinical walkthrough.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph. So as Joseph mentioned, once we finished doing the crosswalk with the product, B. Braun requires doing a clinical walkthrough to continue to make sure that we have product in the correct areas of the hospital. So that includes a team member from B. Braun Medical Affairs, Marie Claude, a local rep, which was myself, and then also the key stakeholders within Gillette Children's to make sure everyone was involved and understood the impact of NRFit. So the clinical walkthrough started with where the patient started in the hospital and then where they ended their care to make sure if there were any sort of areas where NRFit connections needed to be had, product was stocked in those locations. From this, we identified that anesthesia just had one singular workroom where they had product stocked, and then also where the tubing for the pump needed to be located. After doing the clinical walkthrough, we were able to submit for sterile samples to be created so that we could perform a trial at Gillette. But what was really interesting and special to Gillette was they have a simulation lab where we were able to also identify if anything else needed to be added onto the trays. And Katie, I'll let you kind of go into what makes Gillette special with the sim lab.
Thanks, Addie. Yeah, as Addie stated, we are very, very lucky to have a simulation and training center that's just adjacent to our perioperative space that is used both for perioperative training and training needs throughout the whole organization, but it is set up like an OR. So we were able to set up an event for our anesthesia providers where they could come in and simulate placing an epidural and actually open the new kits, feel through them, and walk through the setup. Sorry, I've got some overhead announcements happening. And so this was really instrumental for our anesthesia team and the providers to A, feel comfortable with the new devices, walk through the kits, make sure that we had everything that was needed and available, and then B, add things, make sure that we had what was needed in the trays and outside the trays for sizing and making sure that we had a successful launch of the products as we moved into the go live of our trial. And Addie, I'll let you take it from there.
Yeah, next slide. So after we were able to get the product coming in from overseas that was sterile, we brought it in, like Katie said, for the sim lab to have Dr. Angel go through everything. And then from there went into the trial and ultimate conversion. So as you can see on the right-hand side, Joseph's team was instrumental in this process, making sure that we had product in all of the correct locations, as well as even rubber banded all the drop-ons to the kit. So it was easy access for the providers. Joseph, do you want to add anything then from a supply chain perspective?
Yeah. Well, I think you pretty much covered it, but yeah, so we had twins scheduled for the 25th to trial for our first trial and our trial for our facility, and our supply chain team, the night before got everything in the right place. And all the individual items nearby the kits. Our educators swapped out the CADs that, kind of fitting within this kind of team lift that this project kind of was the team lift that this project was. And, we were ready to go the next day, but, plans change. The patients ended up not needing an epidural. So we had to identify a new candidate for an epidural. So I'll have to Katie to explain that.
Yeah, thank you, Joseph. Yeah, so as we had plotted out and done our full conversion, we had made sure that every piece of equipment was changed out, and so that we only had our NRFit devices in place. And we were ready to go for our twins that were scheduled for their epidurals and their cases, but like we know in healthcare, the plans did change. So we did successfully place our first NRFit device July 8th. Everything went very well for that patient, and it has subsequently gone very well for us. There was no issues or concerns that we encountered on that day or since. So we can just flip to the next slide here and talk through some of our lessons learned. Looking back, there's always challenges with being first. I think we didn't know or understand how widely this had been adopted outside of the US, and then understanding that supply wasn't coming to us from the US, but was actually being shipped from overseas was really helpful. Addie and her team were instrumental in helping us gauge and get products so we could both trial them and we could use them for education and training. And as what was alluded to earlier is involving the key stakeholders earlier, making that wide invitation early on and making sure that we have this endorsed by our anesthesia providers, I think was instrumental when we posed this as a safety device that could greatly impact our patient safety and the caregivers' confidence in the care they're providing. It was not just a yes, it was an emphatic yes from our anesthesia providers, is this is going to be a game changer. And so we made sure that we had a wide invite, that we involved Joseph early on, and Addie and her team were just instrumental in laying out a path and making sure that we had everything that we needed to be successful, and things that we had not even thought through, like a walkthrough, and how essential that was going to be to ensure that we involved all the areas throughout the organization, that we followed that device, that we weren't missing a team or a care area or another mode where epidurals or these devices may be used throughout the organization. So again, I think that was helpful in making sure that we had thought through this entire process, but also to provide some education to stakeholders outside of our area of practice so that they knew and understood what these safety devices were and why they were being brought into the organization. And Risa, I will turn it over to you.
Sure, yeah. Just our lessons learned, our keys to success that we reviewed. There were some challenges with being the first. I think that was primarily for Joseph's area, and we were getting products from overseas. We had a little bit of a lag time and such. We didn't have other organizations to lean to troubleshoot with and such. So there were a few, but really it went quite smoothly. Addie was able to contact her people from overseas, and they did help us out with some of our questions and things and bring in the products. Involving the stakeholders early, like Katie mentioned, having your supply chain there from the get-go is very important. We really found that the success of the supply chain side really led to the success of the clinical side. The providers were very happy to change over to it. They just needed the supplies in their hands. And then we just needed the safety that all of the other supplies were moved out of the areas, and so supply chain just really came through for this project. They were very much our one of our main partners. The clinical walkthrough really determined all of those spaces that we needed those supplies into. So what we would do differently when we kind of came across this, we didn't really come up with too much that we would come up with, with what we would do differently. It actually went very smoothly, and it's continuing to go smoothly. We launched into it in July, and we've just continued with the NRFit throughout, and we've had no issues. So it's been a very smooth and good conversion. Next slide.
Thank you so much for that description and sort of timeline of how your conversion went, and then that advice and sort of lessons learned. We really appreciate those insights. So yeah, Gillette Children was first in the United States here. So I like to share this conversion map. We actually even had a question pop up in the Q&A, the chat feature there, asking about global conversion. For the US here, you can now see it. This map 6 months ago had a 0 here, but this little greater than sign is actually very important because the Gillette Children's will now have that greater than. We are not at 0%. We are now underway officially. But other regions of the world are much further ahead than we are. Japan, as I said earlier in the presentation, is about 100%, or is effectively 100%. New Zealand is 25%. You have different conversion rates in different countries. In Europe, I would say, though, across the board, they're probably but somewhere between maybe on average 30 and 40%. And then the UK is, I think, is leading the way in Europe. The last I heard, they were about 65%, but the NHS actually has a mandate there where by January 31st of 2025, they'll have to be 100% converted. So they should be they should be converted very shortly, 100% to NRFit. So what's next in the conversion process? Well, I think the one of the most important steps is to learn about your current NRAXIOL products. You know, who is supplying these, who's providing the kits that you may be using, and then as part of that, once you know who's supplying them, is requesting one of these crosswalks I mentioned earlier, so you can actually see, well, okay, we're getting this now, and here's the equivalent for NRFit. So that helps you kind of map out what the products will need to be. Another aspect is to make sure your colleagues are aware of the NRFit Patient Safety Initiative, because we see that there's at least here in the U.S. there's quite a bit of lack of awareness about this initiative. So that's a very important aspect, is making others aware of it, and becoming a change agent. If you can, be a champion for this. This isn't a very important initiative, and it really does, as I mentioned earlier, it takes a transition leader to really get the ball rolling and help facilitate the action to move to these safer connectors. And then also, you can always go to stayconnected.org to learn more. And then we're also available by email. If you want to send an email to info@getza.org, we're happy to assist you in any way that we can. So our key takeaways here are that there are a multitude of resources available, including toolkits. And then also, this is not just an isolated initiative. This is a global initiative, and it is underway worldwide. I'd like to just take a quick second to thank our NRFit members who help support us to be able to do webinars like this, and our supporting organizations that we partner with to help advance these patient safety initiatives. And with that, we will address some questions. Let's see, Madison, I know you were looking at these as they came in. Did you want to?
So I was able to answer a couple, but feel free, if we don't mention your question, or if you need more clarification, feel free to bring it up. But one of the questions asked was, did you convert just epidurals to start? Are you planning to convert the entire RA portfolio?
Someone from Gillette want to chime in on that one?
Yeah, I can resell and let you take it.
Yeah, we really concentrated on our epidurals. That's the area that we chose to implement with. It's a fairly defined and confined number of patients, and so we did just do the epidurals for now.
The next question is, what discipline is most of been the transition leader?
So I'll chime in on that. I think that really kind of varies. I've seen, at least on the NFit side, I've seen pretty much every discipline become involved and be passionate about it and become a transition leader. I really think it's whoever it kind of has the drive and determination to want to make a difference and see these safer connectors come about. At least that's been my perspective. I don't know if anyone else on the call here wants to say what their perspective has been, but.
From Gillette, I mean, this was a team effort. Katie and Risa really led kind of pushing this forward, and our medical director, Dr. Angel, was involved and supportive from the beginning. I'd say his kind of support really is what kind of drove this along. So I'd say maybe he among here were key in getting the transition started.
Good. All right. Well, Madison, I was trying to review too. I think that's all I've seen come in that has not been answered. Was there another one? That was it?
I just got a question was there any mention of the slide deck availability? We are going to have the recording posted later this week. But if you're curious and just getting the slide deck, feel free to email info@getza.org, and we're more than happy to share that access with you. Thanks, Ben. Those are the only questions. Oh, I'm sorry, one came in.
Oh, what was that one?
Is Gillette doing any blood patches, and do they have NRFit accessories?
That's a great question.
It's a great question. Yeah. Wish we had Dr. Angel with us today for that one. I know we do blood patches. So I would assume that we have the NRFit accessories for it, because I'm sure that was probably covered in the clinical walkthrough. So my answer to that would be yes. And I know we did bring in a number of the NRFit accessories for different epidural access needs.
Yeah, and Joseph can confirm that, but we did crosswalk all of our current supplies to the NRFit supplies, and we were able to convert everything. So we don't have any standalone items left over. So they are all NRFit, and we did do blood patches prior to the conversion. So yes, I would assume we have everything we need to continue on those procedures.
All right.
Correct.
Well, very good. Well, we are at our time, and if you have any additional questions or something else comes to mind, I again encourage you just to email info@getza.org, and we will try our best to get back to you with the answer to your question. A special thank you today to all our presenters. Really great job. This has been so wonderful to be able to partner with all you and delivering this content, and just super appreciative of your time and helping us with this. So thank you so much.
And I hate to interject, but I just had like 4 questions come in. I'm happy to just address those separately after the webinar or right now, but I definitely just wanted to bring it up.
Sure. I guess anyone that can hang on, we'll try to address those.
Okay. One is, why do you think more facilities have not converted to NRFit?
Well, I can maybe take that one. I think there was a sort of a big product gap here in the United States, at least until early summer, maybe late spring. There were some FDA 510K device clearances that we were kind of critical to having a full enough portfolio in most instances to be able to make it work. And so I think for a while, for a long time, that was kind of the holdup. And those have now come in. So several devices actually, and I'm not aware of any major gap that is still awaiting a FDA 510K clearance. I think that was the big holdup. And then I think it did, other than that, I think too, no one really wants to step out and be first. Fortunately enough, Gillette Children's did that, but most facilities want to be able to see a webinar like this and understand, oh, well, somebody else did it, and here's how they did it and the lessons learned. I think they just want that level of assurance that it can be done instead of having to step out and do it first. I think was a big thing too.
Yeah, and I can just add a little bit to that. And recent I can probably attest to how we started, but I think there was a knowledge gap for sure. I think until we read the ISMP statement and where it mentioned NRFit by name, we were not even aware of it. And so her and I Googled what is NRFit and very shortly reached out to Addie. So I do also think that it wasn't a well-known safety device, at least from our end of things, where we were actively or proactively looking for this. And Addie, I'm sure you can add a lot more here too.
Yeah, I know it's similar to what you said, Katie. I think the biggest thing is there's just a lot of facilities with different practice variations and gaps in products. And so what we found at Gillette was really special of one particular procedure, a team that works incredibly well together, and then also a supply room that only anesthesia goes into to get the NRFit products. But with this type of transition, it is really important to continue to uncover what is needed and to make sure, every stone is unturned so that there is no gaps, and to identify those quickly in the process.
Yeah, and this is Risa. I just wanted to put a plug into the partnership between the GEDSA people and the ISMP. I think having the statement in the ISMP guidelines was really helpful from myself as a med safety person in the field to see that there, because we do lean to the ISMP to help us with our safety practices for medications. And so that led us to GEDSA and these different connecting, misconnection safety devices. And so I think that just that partnership helped so much to bring the awareness out. And I've been seeing and hearing from other colleagues in other organizations that are interested in doing this, and I think they're hearing it from the same places. So it's just great to see this catch on. It's a very much of a project that feels good to implement because it's such a safety hard stop, something that really makes a difference. And once we get it in place, it's a hard stop for this type of error to happen. So we're protecting not only our patients, but also our staff from making a very devastating type of error. So it's a very meaningful project to take on. I would really encourage every organization that was able to attend today to look into it, to protect our patients and families and staff from these types of errors.
Yeah, I just reminded of one thing our Dr. Angel said when we were first bringing this project up, is this addresses a not just potential safety issue, this is a safety issue that this addresses. So I think when we were talking about things that we would have done differently, we would have done it sooner if we knew about it.
All right, I think that's a great note to end on. Thank you, Joseph. But just quickly, Madison, did you see anything else come in, or was there anything else we wanted to
I do
address?
have a couple more questions. One is a question for Gillette. How do you ensure that people do not accidentally order and reintroduce lure devices after conversion?
Well, we have a great team in our inventory there to ensure that won't happen. We are a smaller facility, so if you're a large facility, that might be more challenging. For us, though, because it's a narrower group of folks who are very experienced, we don't have that problem.
So thank you. The next question I have is, at Gillette Children's, was the clinical champion mainly anesthesia or other, for example, pharmacy?
This is recent. I would say it was anesthesia. I mean, they really had the products in their hands and to put them into the patients. So, I mean, we certainly started it, but it was once we got the ball rolling at all, it was really anesthesia that was like, yes, let's get this into place. Yes, yes.
And the last question I have is, someone said, I've been told that Bebron only has epidural products available and Pajunk has all those products. I think this is probably more a question for Addie, but could you provide some? Thank you.
Absolutely. So Bebron has a epidural portfolio, spinal portfolio, as well as a combined spinal epidural portfolio for NRFit products, as well as some syringes, filter needles, filter straws. We're currently qualifying for peripheral nerve blocks to look into next year, and then continuing to look at other product lines in that neuraxial category. So my recommendation would just be to reach out to your local representative to be able to get that crosswalk provided.
And I'll mention for Payonk, who's not on our call, but certainly gets a member, I would encourage you to talk to your rep from Payonk and to visit their website. They certainly have a wide array of NRFit products and have been very, very proactive in this endeavor. So they should be a wonderful partner, and I encourage you to reach out to them. And our other members too. It takes everyone, I think, to really make it happen. So,
yeah. I'd just point out, so our CAD admin set came from ICU, and they were also very helpful. Not present on this call, but they were helpful in getting that product supplied to us.
All right, Madison, do we have any others we want to address?
That is all I have.
All right. Well, thank you again to our presenters. Super appreciative, and encourage everyone that's watched this to hopefully become that champion of change. And as they said, that the only thing they would have done differently is to do it sooner. So I encourage you all to be proactive instead of reactive to this, and let's help advance patient safety. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.